Officer Ryan Kellerman adjusts his rearview mirror as he spots the sleek black BMW turning onto Federal Street, just 3 blocks from the Metro City Courthouse. His practiced eye immediately focuses on the driver, a well-dressed black woman whose expensive car and confident posture trigger his assumptions about drug money and criminal activity that 14 years of aggressive policing have trained him to recognize as opportunity rather than prejudice. Perfect. Kellerman mutters into his radio, reaching for the small plastic bag of cocaine he keeps in his tactical vest for situations exactly like this. His gambling debts have mounted to dangerous levels, and his bookmaker's patience expired last week, along with his promises to pay. The overtime from drug arrests provides extra income, while conviction bonuses supplement his detective salary. Judge Diane Harper checks her GPS as she navigates toward the federal courthouse for her first day presiding over criminal cases. After 23 years as a prosecutor and civil rights attorney, her appointment to the federal bench represents the pinnacle of legal achievement, a chance to ensure justice for all defendants who appear before her courtroom. The BMW's license plate runs clean through Kellerman's database, but clean records never stopped him before when financial pressure demanded arrests that generate conviction statistics and overtime pay. His lights flash as he accelerates toward the vehicle, already composing the arrest report that will justify another search. Yielding another convenient discovery, Maria Santos pauses her sidewalk sweeping outside her convenience store as she recognizes developing police confrontation. Her experiences with Metro PD have taught her to document interactions that often escalate beyond reasonable enforcement into harassment that targets her community without justification. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Metro City, Virginia represents the intersection of federal power and local law enforcement, where the imposing granite facade of the Federal District Court overshadows smaller municipal buildings that house city police operations. The courthouse. District buzzes with legal professionals, defendants, and families navigating the criminal justice system, while Metro Police Department patrol cars cruise streets that connect federal authority with street-level enforcement. Judge Diane Harper's appointment to the federal bench comes after 23 years of distinguished legal service that began in the public defender's office, where she witnessed firsthand how police misconduct affects vulnerable defendants who lack resources to challenge fabricated evidence or procedural violations. Her promotion through prosecutor ranks and civil rights practice provided comprehensive understanding of criminal justice from multiple perspectives. The timing of her judicial appointment coincides with federal investigations into Metro PD's Narcotics Division, where conviction rates have raised questions about evidence integrity and constitutional compliance. Department of Justice oversight focuses on patterns that suggest systematic problems requiring federal intervention to protect civil rights and ensure due process for all defendants. Officer Ryan Kellerman represents the department's old guard, where aggressive enforcement tactics and high arrest numbers created career advancement opportunities, while accountability measures remained limited through union protection and administrative reluctance to investigate successful detectives whose conviction rates impress supervisors and prosecutors. His financial pressures stem from gambling addiction that began innocuously with office pools and fantasy sports, but escalated through casino visits and online betting that promised quick solutions to mounting debts. His bookmaker's enforcement methods involve threats that motivate desperate measures to generate income through overtime shifts and arrest bonuses. The narcotics unit operates with minimal supervision, as Detective Mike Thompson's partnership with Kellerman creates uncomfortable dynamics where challenging questionable tactics could threaten career advancement. His internal conflict between Professional integrity and personal security reflects broader institutional problems that enable corruption through willful blindness. Federal Street connects the courthouse complex with downtown business district, creating mixed traffic patterns where federal judges, police officers, attorneys, and civilians share roadways that become stages for interactions revealing character and institutional culture. The proximity of court and police facilities creates ironic backdrop for corruption encountering accountability. Maria Santos's convenience store serves the courthouse community with daily necessities, while her immigrant background provides perspective about police interactions that affect neighborhood relationships and community trust. Her security cameras capture street activities that sometimes become evidence in legal proceedings, requiring witness testimony. Captain Lisa Rodriguez leads internal affairs investigations that balance accountability demands with institutional loyalty, creating pressure to resolve complaints quickly while maintaining morale among officers whose cooperation determines departmental effectiveness. Her promotion depends on managing scandal prevention rather than comprehensive reform. Dr. Robert Kim's psychiatric practice includes treating law enforcement officers whose stress manifests through various behavioral problems, providing insight into psychological factors that influence decision-making under pressure, while maintaining confidentiality that limits his ability to prevent misconduct. The federal judiciary's independence from local political pressure enables judges to address police misconduct without career consequences that might affect elected prosecutors or appointed officials whose advancement depends on law enforcement support. This institutional protection creates opportunities for accountability that other branches cannot provide. Jennifer Adams represents new generation of law students whose technology skills enable documentation of injustice, while their legal education provides framework for understanding constitutional violations that older generations might accept as normal police procedure. Her recording capabilities create evidence that transforms complaints into prosecutable cases. Officer Sarah Chen's patrol assignment puts her in position to observe detective operations, while her recent academy training emphasized constitutional compliance and community policing that conflicts with aggressive tactics that veterans consider necessary for effective law enforcement in challenging environments. The courthouse district's demographics reflect federal jurisdiction's diversity, as cases involving defendants from throughout the judicial district create interactions between law enforcement and communities whose relationships with police vary, dramatically based on historical experiences and current policies affecting minority populations. Charles Patterson's retirement from police leadership enables advocacy for reform without career consequences, while his institutional knowledge provides credibility for testimony about how departmental culture enables misconduct through informal protection networks that shield problematic officers from accountability. Sergeant David Williams' supervisory role includes monitoring detective activities, while administrative pressure to maintain conviction statistics creates incentives to avoid investigating methods that produce results, even when those methods violate constitutional protections or departmental policies designed to ensure integrity. The stage is set for systemic corruption to encounter federal judicial authority, as Kellerman's financial desperation drives him toward evidence planting that will soon face scrutiny from someone whose legal expertise and institutional position provide tools for comprehensive accountability that his assumptions about victim powerlessness never anticipated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Judge Diane Harper embodies 2 decades of unwavering commitment to justice that began in the public defender's office, where representing indigent defendants taught her how fabricated evidence destroys innocent lives, while inadequate legal representation perpetuates systemic inequality that federal courts have responsibility to address through constitutional enforcement and procedural oversight. Her childhood in Richmond's East End provided first-hand understanding of how police interactions affect community relationships, while her father's work as a postal supervisor and mother's teaching career emphasized education as pathway to social mobility that could transcend economic limitations through academic achievement and professional excellence. Virginia State University provided undergraduate preparation in criminal justice, while her law degree from Howard University connected her to civil rights tradition that influenced her approach to legal practice, focused on protecting constitutional rights for all defendants regardless of their social status, economic resources, or demographic characteristics. The Public Defender's Office introduced Diane to realities of criminal justice, where overworked attorneys manage impossible caseloads while facing prosecutors with unlimited resources and police testimony that juries typically accept without question, creating systematic disadvantages that affect case outcomes more than evidence quality or legal arguments. Her transition to prosecution occurred after witnessing how inadequate defense representation enabled conviction of innocent defendants whose cases required more thorough investigation and constitutional protection. Her prosecutorial experience emphasized ensuring guilty verdicts through proper evidence collection, rather than accepting questionable police work that might result in wrongful convictions. Private practice in civil rights law provided opportunities to challenge police misconduct through federal court litigation that exposed patterns of constitutional violations, requiring systematic reform rather than individual officer discipline. Her expertise in Section 1983 cases established reputation for holding law enforcement accountable through comprehensive legal challenges. The federal judicial appointment represents culmination of legal career dedicated to constitutional protection and equal justice, where lifetime tenure enables decisions based on law rather than political pressure that might influence elected prosecutors or appointed officials whose advancement depends on law enforcement support and conviction statistics. Her divorce 3 years ago eliminated personal distractions while providing motivation to excel professionally in position where decisions affect thousands of defendants whose constitutional rights depend on judicial courage to challenge prosecutorial overreach and police misconduct that threatens due process and equal protection. Diane's parenting responsibilities include raising 2 teenagers whose questions about justice and fairness influence her perspective about judicial decisions that shape society for future generations. Her children's experiences in integrated schools provide contemporary context about racial progress and remaining challenges that affect their understanding of equality. Her Richmond apartment reflects success achieved through merit while maintaining connection to community that shaped her values about service and justice. The location provides convenient access to federal courthouse while enabling relationships with neighbors whose experiences remind her about law enforcement's impact on ordinary citizens. The federal bench requires mastering complex legal procedures while managing courtroom dynamics that include prosecutors, defense attorneys, and defendants whose cases determine whether constitutional protections remain theoretical ideals or practical realities that influence criminal justice outcomes for all participants. Her judicial philosophy emphasizes constitutional compliance and procedural fairness, while recognizing that effective law enforcement requires honest police work and reliable evidence rather than shortcuts that might expedite convictions, while undermining public trust and legal integrity that sustain democratic institutions. The appointment timing coincides with Department of Justice investigations into Metro PD practices that require federal oversight to address systematic problems affecting defendant rights and community relationships. Her position provides authority to ensure compliance with constitutional standards through judicial review and evidentiary challenges. Her legal expertise includes understanding how evidence fabrication operates, while her prosecutorial experience provides insight into how police testimony influences jury decisions and case outcomes. This background enables recognition of misconduct, patterns that less experienced judges might miss through unfamiliarity with investigative techniques. The federal courthouse assignment includes criminal docket featuring cases from Metro PD Narcotics Division, creating potential for encounters with officers whose practices will face scrutiny from someone whose legal background and judicial authority enable comprehensive accountability for constitutional violations and procedural misconduct. Her first week on bench includes orientation about federal criminal procedure, while her staff explains courtroom protocols and case management systems that enable efficient processing of criminal matters requiring constitutional protection and due process compliance for all defendants regardless of charges or circumstances. Officer Ryan Kellerman represents 14 years of law enforcement evolution that prioritized arrest statistics over constitutional compliance, where his narcotics detective position grants authority to search vehicles and make drug arrests that generate conviction bonuses while creating overtime opportunities that supplement his detective salary through aggressive enforcement tactics. His career progression began as patrol officer whose enthusiasm for drug arrests impressed supervisors who measured effectiveness through statistics rather than constitutional compliance or community relationships. Promotion to detective occurred based on conviction rates that made him valuable asset for department performance metrics and prosecutorial success. The gambling addiction started innocuously through office betting pools and fantasy football leagues, but escalated through casino visits and online platforms that promised quick wealth while creating debts that required increasingly desperate measures to maintain payments and avoid enforcement actions that threatened personal safety and professional reputation. His financial obligations now exceed $75,000 in gambling debts, while his bookmaker's patience has expired along with extension agreements that previously provided breathing room. The enforcement threats involve physical violence and career destruction. Through exposure of his gambling problems to police administrators who prohibit such activities. Kellerman's evidence planting operation developed gradually through opportunities created by vehicle searches that failed to yield narcotics but couldn't justify arrest reports and overtime claims. His tactical vest contains small bags of cocaine, purchased from arrested dealers who never reached booking because their drugs became evidence for future operations. His partner Mike Thompson suspects misconduct but lacks evidence to support formal complaints, while his career advancement depends on maintaining cooperative relationship with veteran detective whose conviction record enhances unit performance. Statistics that determine promotional opportunities and administrative approval. The department's culture enables Kellerman's behavior through informal protection networks, where questioning colleague methods violates solidarity expectations while generating administrative scrutiny that threatens career advancement. Internal affairs investigations typically conclude with insufficient evidence when officer testimony supports reasonable doubt. His targeting strategy focuses on expensive vehicles driven by minority individuals whose appearance suggests drug involvement, while their legal representation typically involves overworked public defenders who lack resources to challenge evidence. Through comprehensive investigation or expert testimony that could expose fabrication techniques. The conviction bonuses create financial incentives for arrests that result in guilty pleas or trial verdicts, while over time, compensation for court appearances and investigation time enables Kellerman to generate additional income through cases that require his testimony and evidence presentation to support prosecutorial strategies. His relationship with prosecutors emphasizes providing testimony that supports conviction while avoiding detailed questioning about investigation techniques or evidence collection procedures that might reveal constitutional violations or procedural shortcuts designed to expedite arrests rather than ensure accuracy. Captain Rodriguez's internal affairs position creates reluctant oversight of Kellerman's activities, while administrative pressure to maintain unit effectiveness discourages investigations that might reduce arrest statistics or generate negative publicity about departmental performance and community relationships. The federal investigation into Metro PD practices focuses on patterns that suggest systematic constitutional violations requiring Department of Justice intervention, but Kellerman's individual cases haven't attracted specific attention due to his careful evidence planting techniques and prosecutor cooperation that validates his work. His psychological profile includes narcissistic tendencies that enable rationalization of misconduct as necessary law enforcement, while his gambling addiction creates desperation that overrides ethical considerations about constitutional rights and defendant welfare that should guide police behavior. The narcotics unit operates with minimal supervision, as detective work involves independent investigation and evidence collection that supervisors rarely scrutinize beyond arrest reports and conviction outcomes that measure effectiveness through statistics rather than constitutional compliance or community impact. Kellerman's knowledge of criminal procedure enables sophisticated evidence planting that avoids obvious constitutional violations while creating reasonable doubt about fabrication claims that defense attorneys might raise during suppression hearings or trial testimony challenging investigation techniques and evidence integrity. His targeting of Judge Harper's vehicle reflects assumptions about minority wealth involving drug money, while her expensive car and professional appearance trigger his prejudices about criminal activity that his experience conditions him to recognize as opportunity for arrest and conviction that generates financial benefits. The irony of planting evidence on federal judge represents ultimate collision between police corruption and judicial authority, where his assumptions about victim powerlessness will encounter constitutional expertise and institutional position that enables comprehensive accountability for misconduct that threatens criminal justice integrity. Kellerman's patrol lights activate as he accelerates toward Judge Harper's BMW, his practiced movements reflecting years of traffic stops that provide opportunities for vehicle searches and evidence discovery. His radio crackles with fabricated urgency as he reports suspicious vehicle behavior that will justify aggressive enforcement tactics designed to create probable cause for search. Unit 47 initiating traffic stop on suspicious vehicle exhibiting erratic driving patterns, Kellerman announces with theatrical authority that establishes narrative foundation for subsequent arrest report. His body camera remains conveniently malfunctioned, while his dashboard recording system experiences technical difficulties that prevent documentation of his actual behavior. Judge Harper checks her mirrors as she recognizes police pursuit, while her judicial experience provides understanding of traffic stop procedures that should ensure constitutional compliance and respectful interaction. Her appointment schedule includes criminal docket review that ironically features several cases involving narcotics arrests by Metro PD officers. Detective Thompson monitors the situation through radio communications, while his growing unease about Kellerman's methods conflicts with partnership loyalty and career protection instincts. His patrol car remains positioned blocks away as administrative. Protocols require backup for narcotics investigations that might encounter armed resistance. Maria Santos activates her cell phone recording as her experience with police interactions teaches her to document encounters that often escalate beyond reasonable enforcement into harassment targeting community members. Her security cameras also capture street activity that could become evidence if investigations require witness testimony. "Ma'am, license and registration, please," Kellerman demands with aggressive authority while his hand positions near his weapon in intimidation gesture designed to establish dominance through fear rather than professional courtesy. His approach violates training protocols about respectful citizen interaction and constitutional compliance. Judge Harper complies with identification request while maintaining dignity that reflects judicial training in managing courtroom authority and legal procedures. Her professional demeanor contrasts sharply with Kellerman's aggressive posture, as she provides documents that clearly establish her federal judicial position and legitimate presence in Courthouse District. Officer Chen observes from her patrol position as academy training emphasized constitutional compliance and community policing that conflicts with aggressive tactics she witnesses among veteran officers. Her recent graduation provides fresh perspective about proper procedures that experienced officers might ignore through habit or institutional pressure. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," Kellerman orders without constitutional justification, while his fabricated suspicion of drug activity provides pretext for search that will supposedly discover evidence he plans to plant during vehicle inspection. His voice carries authority designed to prevent resistance that might complicate his scheme. Dr. Kim pauses his walking routine as his psychiatric expertise recognizes aggressive behavior patterns that suggest psychological problems affecting professional judgment. His medical background includes treating law enforcement officers whose stress manifests through various behavioral issues that threaten both personal welfare and public safety. Judge Harper questions the legal basis for vehicle exit request, while her constitutional knowledge provides framework for understanding Fourth Amendment protections that should prevent unreasonable searches without probable cause or reasonable suspicion based on specific articulable facts rather than demographic profiling. "I'm conducting investigation of suspected drug activity in this area." Kellerman fabricates additional justification, while his experience with evidence planting enables creative narratives that typically satisfy prosecutors and judges who lack time for detailed scrutiny of investigation techniques and constitutional compliance. Jennifer Adams begins live streaming the encounter through social media platforms as her law school training emphasizes documenting constitutional violations, while her technology skills enable real-time documentation that could provide evidence for future legal challenges or civil rights complaints. Sergeant Williams receives radio notification about traffic stop involving detective unit, while his supervisory responsibilities include monitoring field operations that might generate complaints or administrative problems requiring damage control, and incident management through proper documentation and witness coordination. The tension escalates as Kellerman's evidence-planting scheme requires privacy that multiple witnesses and recording devices threaten to compromise. His financial desperation drives continued aggression, while his assumptions about victim powerlessness prevent recognition that his target possesses legal expertise and institutional authority. "Ma'am, I'm going to search your vehicle for narcotics based on suspicious behavior and drug activity in this area," Kellerman announces, while producing the plastic bag that will become planted evidence during vehicle search designed to justify arrest and generate conviction that enables overtime payment and bonus compensation. Charles Patterson approaches from his advocacy organization office. As his retired police chief, experience provides recognition of misconduct patterns, while his reform advocacy includes documenting police behavior that violates constitutional rights and departmental policies designed to ensure professional standards and community trust. The escalation continues as multiple witnesses document behavior that violates constitutional protections, while Kellerman's corruption encounters scrutiny that his career-long impunity never prepared him to handle. His evidence-planting scheme approaches critical moment that will determine whether misconduct succeeds or faces devastating exposure. Kellerman reaches into his tactical vest with movements practiced through months of evidence-planting operations, his fingers locating the small plastic bag of cocaine that will transform routine traffic stop into felony arrest. His desperation to generate arrest income overrides rational assessment of risks created by multiple witnesses and recording devices documenting his behavior. Well, what do we have here? Kellerman announces with theatrical surprise while producing the cocaine bag from Judge Harper's center console, where he planted it during his fabricated vehicle search. His performance follows scripts developed through previous evidence-planting operations that convinced prosecutors and juries of defendant guilt. Judge Harper immediately recognizes evidence fabrication through her prosecutorial experience with drug cases, while her constitutional expertise provides understanding of Fourth Amendment violations occurring during illegal search and seizure. Her judicial training emphasizes maintaining dignity while documenting violations that will require administrative and legal response. Maria Santos captures clear footage of evidence planting through her phone camera, while her security system records additional angles that establish timeline and demonstrate Kellerman's deception. Her documentation will become crucial evidence for internal affairs investigation and federal civil rights prosecution requiring witness testimony. "Officer, I observed you place that substance in my vehicle during your search," Judge Harper states, with judicial authority, while her legal background provides precise language for documenting constitutional violations. "Multiple witnesses and recording devices have captured your evidence fabrication for subsequent investigation and prosecution." Detective Thompson arrives as backup, while his radio monitoring revealed Kellerman's drug discovery announcement. His growing suspicion about partner misconduct conflicts with loyalty expectations, while his observation of evidence planting creates moral crisis, requiring choice between career protection and constitutional obligation. Dr. Kim approaches with medical professional authority, while his psychiatric background recognizes psychological breakdown manifesting through criminal behavior. His witness testimony will provide expert perspective about mental health factors affecting police decision-making while establishing credibility for subsequent legal proceedings. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for possession of controlled substances." Kellerman continues his fabricated narrative while producing handcuffs that represent culmination of evidence-planting scheme. His tunnel vision prevents recognition that his target possesses legal expertise and judicial authority that will transform harassment into career destruction. Jennifer Adams's live stream reaches hundreds of viewers who witness police corruption in real time, while her legal education enables commentary about constitutional violations that educate audience about civil rights protections. Her documentation provides evidence that will support federal prosecution and civil rights enforcement. Officer Chen documents incident details through official reports, while her academy training emphasized integrity and constitutional compliance that Kellerman's behavior violates. Her testimony will support internal affairs investigation while establishing credibility for prosecution of evidence fabrication and civil rights violations. Officer Kellerman, I am Federal District Judge Diane Harper, she announces with judicial authority that immediately transforms power dynamics while revealing identity that will determine consequences for misconduct. You have just committed federal crimes while being documented by multiple witnesses and recording devices. The revelation hits Kellerman like physical blow as he processes implications of evidence planting against federal judge whose constitutional expertise and institutional authority enable comprehensive prosecution of police corruption. His assumptions about victim powerlessness crumble as reality exposes catastrophic misjudgment. Sergeant Williams receives emergency notification about federal judge involvement, while his supervisory responsibilities demand immediate damage control. To protect departmental reputation and prevent federal investigation that could threaten institutional survival through comprehensive reform requirements. Charles Patterson recognizes dramatic power reversal as police corruption encounters judicial authority, while his reform advocacy provides framework for understanding how evidence-planting prosecution could influence systematic changes throughout law enforcement culture and accountability mechanisms. Captain Rodriguez receives radio alert about federal judge arrest, requiring immediate intervention, while her internal affairs expertise recognizes crisis-threatening departmental survival through federal oversight and civil rights enforcement that could restructure entire organization through consent decree requirements. The breaking point arrives as Kellerman realizes his evidence-planting scheme targeted someone whose judicial position enables federal prosecution of police corruption, while his desperation for gambling debt relief created constitutional crisis that will destroy his career and freedom through comprehensive accountability. Multiple recording devices capture moment when police corruption encounters judicial authority, while witnesses document evidence fabrication that will become federal case study about constitutional violations requiring systematic reform through legal enforcement and institutional accountability measures. The confrontation reaches climax as Kellerman's financial desperation collides with constitutional expertise, while his assumptions about victim powerlessness face devastating correction through revelation of judicial authority that transforms harassment into federal prosecution of civil rights violations. The federal identification badge gleams in afternoon sunlight as Judge Harper displays credentials that immediately establish her constitutional authority and institutional position within the judicial system that determines consequences for police misconduct. Her calm presentation contrasts sharply with Kellerman's growing panic as reality dismantles his assumptions about victim powerlessness. Officer Kellerman, you have just committed evidence tampering, civil rights violations under color of law, and conspiracy to deprive constitutional rights, Judge Harper states with prosecutorial precision, while her judicial authority transforms routine harassment into federal criminal case requiring immediate investigation and comprehensive legal response. Detective Thompson's radio crackles with emergency protocols as supervisors recognize crisis requiring immediate damage control, while federal judge involvement triggers administrative responses designed to prevent Department of Justice intervention. Through comprehensive investigation and institutional accountability measures, Maria Santos continues recording, while her documentation captures moment when police corruption encounters judicial authority that enables prosecution typically unavailable to community members lacking resources and legal expertise for challenging evidence fabrication through constitutional litigation and civil rights enforcement. Dr. Kim approaches with medical professional credibility, while his psychiatric background provides expert perspective about psychological factors affecting police decision-making under financial pressure that creates desperation enabling criminal behavior and constitutional violations requiring treatment and legal accountability. Judge Harper, this is Detective Mike Thompson, her partner announces, with growing recognition that Kellerman's misconduct creates career-threatening association, while his witness testimony could determine whether internal investigation results in departmental reform or individual scapegoating that preserves institutional problems. Jennifer Adams's live stream explodes with viewer engagement as audience recognizes dramatic reversal, where evidence-planting victim reveals judicial authority, enabling federal prosecution of police corruption. Her social media platforms amplify documentation beyond local boundaries into national conversation about law enforcement accountability. Officer Chen immediately activates additional recording protocols, while her academy training emphasized constitutional compliance that Kellerman's behavior violates through evidence fabrication, requiring comprehensive investigation and legal response that could influence departmental culture and training programs. Captain Rodriguez arrives with Internal Affairs Authority, while her crisis management training recognizes federal judge involvement, requiring immediate evidence preservation and witness coordination to prevent additional constitutional violations that could trigger Department of Justice oversight and institutional restructuring. Sergeant Williams coordinates backup response, while his supervisory position creates liability for subordinate misconduct that federal prosecution could extend to management accountability, requiring comprehensive investigation of departmental culture enabling evidence planting and constitutional violations. Officer Kellerman, you are immediately suspended pending federal investigation, Captain Rodriguez announces with administrative authority, while her internal affairs expertise recognizes evidence fabrication against federal judge requiring maximum accountability to prevent institutional destruction through comprehensive legal enforcement. Charles Patterson documents incident through reform advocacy protocols, while his retired police chief background provides credibility for testimony about departmental culture that enables misconduct through inadequate supervision and accountability mechanisms requiring systematic reform through federal oversight. The courthouse proximity creates additional irony, as Kellerman's evidence planting occurs blocks from federal building, where Judge Harper will soon preside over criminal cases potentially involving his previous arrests and testimony, creating comprehensive review of his investigation techniques and evidence integrity. FBI agent Harrison Wells receives notification about federal judge targeted by police evidence planting, while his corruption investigation authority includes comprehensive review of Kellerman's previous cases requiring examination of conviction, integrity, and constitutional compliance throughout his detective career. Federal Marshal Bradley coordinates courthouse security response, while his protective responsibilities include ensuring judicial safety from retaliation that evidence-planting prosecution might trigger through law enforcement personnel whose misconduct faces federal accountability and career destruction. The revelation completes power transformation as Kellerman's evidence-planting scheme encounters constitutional expertise and judicial authority that his assumptions about victim demographics and powerlessness completely failed to anticipate. Through limited understanding of professional diversity and institutional position, District Attorney Cross receives emergency briefing about federal judge evidence planting, while her prosecutorial responsibilities include determining whether state charges complement federal prosecution or create jurisdictional conflicts requiring coordination with Department of Justice Civil Rights Enforcement. Defense Attorney Vasquez recognizes implications for pending cases involving Kellerman's testimony while her public defender experience provides understanding of how evidence fabrication affects conviction integrity, requiring comprehensive review of previous arrests and prosecutorial decisions. The reversal establishes precedent for accountability as police corruption encounters judicial authority, enabling federal prosecution that individual victims typically cannot pursue through resource limitations and legal expertise requirements that institutional protection often exploits. Judge Foster receives colleague notification about evidence planting incident, while his chief judge authority includes administrative response, ensuring judicial independence and institutional integrity that federal court system requires for constitutional protection and due process compliance. Federal protocols activate immediately as FBI agent Wells coordinates evidence preservation, while his corruption investigation authority requires comprehensive documentation of evidence planting against federal judge. His response includes witness interviews, recording analysis, and physical evidence collection that will support federal prosecution under civil rights statutes. Kellerman's suspension becomes immediate termination as Captain Rodriguez recognizes evidence fabrication against federal judge requires maximum accountability to prevent Department of Justice intervention through consent decree and institutional restructuring. His 14-year career dissolves instantly through documented constitutional violations. Judge Harper maintains judicial composure while coordinating with Federal Marshal Bradley about security protocols, ensuring her safety from potential retaliation. Her constitutional expertise guides evidence preservation requirements that will support both criminal prosecution and civil rights enforcement against police misconduct. Detective Thompson faces immediate interrogation about knowledge of partners' evidence planting operations, while his cooperation with federal investigation determines whether he faces conspiracy charges or receives witness protection through testimony supporting comprehensive prosecution of police corruption. Maria Santos provides witness testimony, while her documentation becomes crucial evidence supporting federal prosecution. Her security cameras captured multiple angles of evidence planting that establish timeline and demonstrate Kellerman's criminal behavior requiring accountability through comprehensive legal response. Dr. Kim offers expert testimony about psychological factors affecting police decision-making, while his medical credentials provide credibility for analysis of gambling addiction and financial pressure, creating desperation that enables criminal behavior and constitutional violations requiring treatment and accountability. Jennifer Adams's social media documentation reaches millions of viewers, while her legal education provides commentary about constitutional protections and civil rights enforcement. Her viral content creates public pressure for accountability while educating audience about police corruption and judicial authority. Officer Chen files detailed incident report, while her academy training emphasized constitutional compliance that Kellerman's behavior violated through evidence fabrication. Her testimony will support internal investigation while establishing credibility for prosecution, requiring comprehensive departmental reform. Internal affairs investigation expands beyond individual misconduct to systematic review of narcotics unit supervision and accountability mechanisms that enabled evidence planting through inadequate oversight and cultural problems requiring comprehensive institutional reform through federal intervention. Federal grand jury convenes within 48 hours as Department of Justice Civil Rights Division recognizes evidence planting against federal judge requiring maximum prosecution. The case establishes precedent for law enforcement accountability, while demonstrating consequences for constitutional violations. Sergeant Williams faces administrative review of supervisory responsibilities, while his management of detective unit includes accountability for subordinate misconduct, requiring investigation of leadership failures, enabling evidence planting through inadequate oversight and cultural tolerance. Charles Patterson's advocacy organization coordinates media response, while his retired police chief background provides credibility for reform recommendations requiring systematic changes in law enforcement culture and accountability mechanisms preventing constitutional violations. Court security increases around Judge Harper, while federal martial protocols ensure judicial safety from potential retaliation that evidence-planting prosecution might trigger through law enforcement personnel whose careers face destruction through federal accountability measures. District Attorney Cross recuses her office from state prosecution while recognizing federal jurisdiction over civil rights violations requires coordination with Department of Justice to prevent jurisdictional conflicts and ensure comprehensive accountability for constitutional violations. Defense Attorney Vasquez initiates review of pending cases involving Kellerman's testimony, while her public defender experience guides examination of conviction integrity, requiring comprehensive investigation of evidence fabrication throughout his detective career, affecting defendant rights. The immediate response demonstrates how evidence planting against federal judge triggers institutional accountability that individual victims typically cannot pursue through resource limitations, while establishing precedent for law enforcement consequences that constitutional violations require. Gambling debt collectors receive federal investigation as Kellerman's financial motivations for evidence planting create additional criminal liability, while his desperation enabled constitutional violations requiring comprehensive prosecution and institutional reform. Metro PD policy revision begins immediately, as evidence-planting incident triggers administrative response preventing additional constitutional violations through enhanced supervision, training programs, and accountability mechanisms, ensuring officer compliance with federal law. Federal prosecution moves with unprecedented speed as Department of Justice Civil Rights Division recognizes evidence planting against federal judge requiring maximum accountability while establishing legal precedent for law enforcement constitutional violations that typically avoid comprehensive prosecution through institutional protection and resource limitations. Kellerman faces 18 federal felony counts, including conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law, evidence tampering, perjury, and obstruction of justice. His gambling addiction provides no defense against constitutional violations, while his 14-year career enables enhanced penalties for systematic misconduct affecting multiple cases. The grand jury investigation expands to comprehensive review of Kellerman's previous arrests, requiring examination of conviction integrity throughout his detective career. Federal prosecutors discover pattern of evidence planting affecting 63 cases requiring conviction review and potential prisoner release through constitutional violations. Judge Harper recuses herself from any cases involving Kellerman's testimony, while her judicial ethics training prevents perceived conflicts of interest. Her constitutional expertise guides federal prosecution through evidence law and civil rights protections, requiring comprehensive accountability for police misconduct. Detective Thompson receives immunity in exchange for testimony about Kellerman's evidence-planting operations, while his cooperation reveals departmental culture, enabling misconduct through informal protection networks and administrative reluctance to investigate constitutional violations. Internal Affairs investigation results in disciplinary action against supervisors whose oversight failures enabled evidence planting through inadequate accountability mechanisms. Captain Rodriguez faces demotion, while Sergeant Williams receives suspension for management negligence, requiring comprehensive training and supervision reform. Federal consent decree restructures Metro PD operations through Department of Justice oversight, requiring constitutional compliance training, evidence handling protocols, and accountability mechanisms preventing future violations. The institutional Reform influences law enforcement practices throughout Virginia. Civil rights settlement provides Judge Harper $4.7 million, while she donates entire amount to legal aid organizations supporting defendants whose constitutional rights face violation through police misconduct and inadequate legal representation, requiring resource enhancement and advocacy support. Kellerman's federal conviction results in 12-year prison sentence, while his evidence fabrication destroys prosecution integrity, requiring conviction review, affecting hundreds of cases throughout his career. His gambling debts become irrelevant, compared to federal prison time and lifetime legal consequences. FBI investigation reveals systematic evidence planting operations involving multiple officers, requiring comprehensive prosecution, while federal oversight ensures constitutional compliance through monitoring and accountability mechanisms, preventing institutional protection of misconduct. The case establishes Supreme Court precedent for evidence fabrication prosecution, while civil rights enforcement demonstrates federal authority over local law enforcement constitutional violations, requiring systematic accountability and institutional reform protecting individual rights. Judge Harper's judicial reputation enhances through dignified response to police misconduct, while her constitutional expertise guides courtroom procedures, ensuring due process protection for all defendants appearing before federal court, regardless of law enforcement testimony or evidence presentation. Maria Santos receives community recognition for witness courage, while her documentation becomes template for civilian oversight requiring recording devices and testimony supporting constitutional protection through citizen advocacy and federal enforcement mechanisms. Dr. Kim's expert testimony influences police psychological evaluation programs, while his medical expertise guides treatment protocols for law enforcement personnel whose mental health affects professional judgment and constitutional compliance, requiring intervention and accountability. Jennifer Adams' documentation wins journalism awards for exposing police corruption, while her legal education enables advocacy career focusing on civil rights protection and law enforcement accountability through constitutional litigation and institutional reform. Officer Chen's integrity during misconduct incident results in promotion, while her academy training influences departmental culture, emphasizing constitutional compliance over arrest statistics and conviction rates that previously motivated evidence fabrication and constitutional violations. 5 years after the evidence planting incident, Metro PD transforms from corruption-tolerant institution into national model for constitutional compliance and police accountability. The Harper Protocols, named after Judge Harper's dignified response to misconduct, become mandatory training for law enforcement agencies nationwide, requiring civil rights protection and evidence integrity. Federal legislation, influenced by the case, establishes nationwide standards for police evidence handling while requiring body cameras, civilian oversight, and accountability mechanisms, preventing constitutional violations through systematic reform rather than individual punishment after harm occurs. Judge Harper's judicial career flourishes through reputation for constitutional expertise and institutional integrity, while her courtroom becomes template for due process protection, ensuring equal justice regardless of defendant demographics or law enforcement testimony requiring comprehensive evidence evaluation. Kellerman serves federal sentence, while his conviction influences police academy training about consequences for constitutional violations. His evidence-planting techniques become case study material, teaching recognition and prevention of misconduct, requiring institutional culture changes throughout law enforcement. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division gains enhanced authority through legislation, inspired by federal judge evidence planting, while new enforcement mechanisms enable systematic prosecution of police misconduct that individual victims typically cannot pursue through resource and expertise limitations. Metro PD recruitment emphasizes constitutional compliance and community service, while psychological evaluation prevents hiring officers whose profiles suggest corruption potential. The cultural transformation attracts diverse candidates committed to civil rights protection rather than aggressive enforcement statistics. Federal court oversight continues through consent decree monitoring, while constitutional compliance becomes integral to police operations rather than legal burden requiring accommodation. The institutional change demonstrates how accountability creates excellence rather than operational impediment. Research demonstrates that police departments implementing Harper protocols experience 47% reduction in constitutional violations, while community trust increases dramatically through transparent accountability and civilian oversight. Mechanisms ensuring officer compliance with federal law. Judge Harper's autobiography, Constitutional Courage, Confronting Police Corruption from the Bench, becomes required reading in law schools, while her experience demonstrates how judicial independence enables accountability that political systems might compromise through electoral considerations. The evidence-planting prosecution influences international law enforcement standards, while Harper protocols become template for police reform in democratic societies requiring constitutional protection and institutional accountability, preventing authoritarian drift through law enforcement misconduct. Detective Thompson's rehabilitation through cooperation demonstrates how institutional pressure enables misconduct, while individual courage can create accountability, requiring systematic support for officers who challenge corruption despite career risks and peer pressure. Maria Santos establishes Civilian Oversight Organization, while her witness testimony becomes template for community advocacy, requiring documentation and federal support for constitutional protection through citizen engagement and institutional accountability. Federal judicial independence gains recognition through Harper's case, while lifetime tenure enables decisions based on constitutional principle rather than political pressure that might compromise equal justice, requiring judicial courage and institutional protection. Most importantly, the story demonstrates how constitutional expertise and judicial authority can transform individual injustice into systematic reform, protecting future generations from police misconduct, while proving that institutional accountability requires both legal knowledge and moral courage. The transformation shows that sustainable law enforcement requires constitutional foundation rather than aggressive tactics that violate civil rights, while authentic police work protects community safety through legal methods that maintain public trust and institutional legitimacy. Kellerman's career destruction serves permanent warning that constitutional violations create consequences extending beyond individual harm to institutional accountability, while his behavior becomes cautionary tale about how personal problems enable misconduct requiring prevention through support and oversight. The legacy proves that justice delayed is not justice denied when victims possess resources and expertise for federal enforcement, while constitutional protection requires both individual courage and institutional mechanisms ensuring accountability, regardless of perpetrator position or victim demographics. 10 years later, police evidence fabrication decreases by 68% in jurisdictions implementing Harper standards, while conviction integrity improves dramatically when law enforcement prioritizes constitutional compliance over arrest, statistics that previously motivated misconduct and civil rights violations. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.